Next on PIJN News, Dr. Chaps reports on these important issues.
Did you know there was a Christian revival of prayer behind the scenes at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland? We interview Chris Long with the Ohio Christian Alliance.
Former Navy chaplain Gordon James Klingenschmidt took a stand to defend religious freedom by daring to pray publicly in Jesus' name. Now he helps you by reporting the news, discerning the spirits, and praying the scriptures. Would you pray with us? Here's Dr. Chaps.
God bless you in Jesus' name. My name is Chaplain Gordon James Klingenschmidt, Dr. Chaps, and you're watching PIJN News. On this show, we normally like to report the news, discern the spirits, and pray the scriptures in Jesus' name. But today we have a special guest, a live in-studio interview with the man behind the scenes leading the Christian prayer movement at the Republican National Convention, which was recently held in Cleveland, Ohio. My guest is Chris Long with the Ohio Christian Alliance, and he is live with us here in the studio. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chaps. It's good to be with you.
So, Chris, I've known you a long time, going back to at least 2005, now 11 years. You are a national activist, but you're based in Ohio, near the capital, I think halfway between Columbus and Cleveland, if I remember.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And as a national activist, you have been on the forefront of many of the cultural, political movements as a Christian with a Bible degree, and you've been a missionary, and you've done all kinds of things for Jesus over your career. But now you are uniquely positioned as the president of Ohio Christian Alliance. You were there on the floor at the RNC, Republican National Convention in Cleveland. First of all, introduce yourself and what is Ohio Christian Alliance?
The Ohio Christian Alliance is a public policy voter education grassroots organization. And we've been around for 25 years. We're celebrating 25 years. Earlier, we were the Christian Coalition Chapter of Ohio, and in 2006, we changed our name to the Ohio Christian Alliance, continuing the same work that we always have, and that is surveying candidates for office, registering Christians to vote, educating Christians on the issue, and urging them to get to the polls to vote for candidates that line up with their biblical worldview and with their conservative values. Now, it's worked over the years. We have a lot of fine men and women that are serving us in the state legislature at this time and over the years. But, you mentioned about the nation. The nation came to us this time in coming to Cleveland, the RNC convention. In fact, it was the first major political convention that Ohio has held since 1936. In fact, the last time it was a Republican convention, and it was at Old Public Hall in downtown Cleveland. But this time, of course, the RNC convention was coming to Cleveland, and a lot of work went into that, and of course it'd be over 50,000 attendees, plus international media and all these folks that are coming, and the eyes of the nation would be upon Cleveland in mid-July. Well, with all the craziness going on in our country right now, with violence against police and all that's happening domestically that has many people concerned, we were concerned. There was a lot of concern about the convention. Would there be violence, either in the streets or problems with protests getting out of hand? So what we did is we called people to pray.
And that's what you guys are good at. I mean, you don't personally endorse candidates for public office. You weren't there in favor of Cruz or Trump or any candidate, but you were there as a representative of Jesus Christ to lead a prayer movement behind the scenes to pave the way, to prepare for what became the convention.
That's right. I do believe that the Lord spoke to many of his people across the country just to begin to pray. Our theme verse was John 14:26, and that is, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth I unto you. And let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." So we called for prayer for the city of Cleveland, that, Lord, you would just send peace on the city. So we had folks prayer walking the city. We prayer walked around the convention center downtown and had people prayer drive. And then, of course, there was a great prayer rally that took place on the Saturday before the convention began, and that was called The Response, and it was at the Wolstein Center at Cleveland State University. There was 4,000 to 6,000 people that showed up that day and prayed and prayer and praise for about 6 hours. There were no keynote speakers, but just prayer and intercession.
And some of the media, I remember, asked you, so What is this? These Christians are assembling. Is this a political movement? And what was your response?
We said, look, our concern is that for the city and for our police officers and even for the demonstrators that were coming in, that they would be able to exercise their First Amendment right. And as we would have it no other way. We would defend that. We may not agree with these folks, but, the First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech. And as we, as Christians, enjoy freedom of speech, we want others to have that as well. So that was our concern, but that it be done peaceably and in order in the city of Cleveland. Well, God heard our prayer. Because there wasn't one single insurance claim for any damage. Imagine that.
Wow.
And there were police that came in from all across the country. There was concern leading up to the convention that the Cleveland Police Department didn't have enough personnel to handle all the crowds that were coming in, including protesters. So they put a call out. And you know what? The men and women in blue, they responded from around the country. They came in, and it's funny to see all these different uniforms of police that were there. And I remember them being sworn in, and of course, swearing in, upholding the Ohio Constitution,
right?
Which was great. And I don't know if they had time to read it, but at least they were swearing allegiance to not only the federal Constitution, but the Ohio Constitution, as they would be serving as police in the community of Cleveland. The mayor also he's a Democrat, and he was welcoming everyone to his city, essentially saying, look, we may not play on the same political team, but we want you to have a great time while you're here in our city. And folks really did. I heard numerous times people just had a great time. They said, everyone's so friendly. We love this place. We'd love to move here. Had to remind them that we have winter 5 months of the year.
Yeah.
They said, oh, yeah, my husband told me about that. We'll be staying in the Carolinas. But they'll come here and visit in the summer. But, it was a great event. And on the heels, of course, of our national championship of the NBA, of course.
The Cleveland Cavaliers.
The Cleveland
LeBron
Cavaliers.
James,
Yes,
congratulations.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And 1.3 million fans flooded the streets just 3 weeks earlier. And that also was a peaceful assembly. Think about that.
Now, I heard, now I'm just estimating, if there were 3,000 delegates, maybe another couple thousand alternates, maybe inside of the RNC arena, you had, let's just round up, maybe 10,000 people. But outside, there were 8,000 protesters, I heard, that were bussed in by George Soros.
Yes.
They were paid protesters. People came there trying to cause trouble, and they ended up just being peaceful on the streets. And the police had such a professional response, and nobody was arrested?
There were some arrests. There was, in fact, in Public Square, which was just, they just did a whole reconstruction of Public Square. It looks really great. And they launched it just before the convention. But there was protesters downtown, and I understand that there was a group, Black Lives Matter, the Ku Klux Klan, and the Westboro Baptist. So talk about a cocktail for, real problems. And those groups
could have been bad.
Could have been bad. The police chief of Cleveland, he got in the middle, and he started leading in prayer.
Wow.
And it just brought peace to the whole situation.
What a blessing. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Chris Long about John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, and also Donald Trump.
This is PIJN News, defending your religious freedom. Dr. Chaps will be right back.
Do you care about defending religious liberty? I know you do. And that's why I'm asking you to take action today. Don't just sit there, but do something. Visit our website, prayinjesusname.org, and sign a petition that we'll fax to Congress on your behalf. In fact, there are 3 specific petitions I want you to sign to defend military chaplains who are under fire. The first is to support H.R. 343. This is a bill introduced in Congress by my friend, Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina, to protect free speech for military chaplains who are sometimes punished if they use the word Jesus in their prayers. Well, if you know my story, you know that I was punished in 2006, even at court-martial, because I used the word Jesus in my prayers in uniform in front of the White House. Well, I was later vindicated by Congress, who said it's okay for me to do that. But did you know 65 other chaplains are now suing the Navy? I was not the only person. Our second petition I want you to sign is to protect military chapel buildings, which are being desecrated. Christian altars, Catholic or Protestant, are being desecrated by homosexual wedding ceremonies in all 50 states under this order by the Obama administration. Well, that deprives all of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines of a sacred worship space which ought to be protected. And instead, they're going to punish the chaplain if he won't turn over the keys to his chapel. Here's another petition I want you to sign, and this is to stop threatening court-martial for troops who talk about Jesus. Even recently, the Pentagon is saying, oh, we're going to threaten you with crime of proselytizing. No, that's not right. Any soldier ought to be able to talk about his or her faith in Jesus Christ and to have that same religious freedom of speech that we sacrifice to give for others. When you sign these petitions, we will fax them to Congress, and it's free. I want you to take action today. Sign these 3 important petitions at prayinjesusname.org. Go there today.
Empowering you, the grassroots activist. Here is Dr. Chaps.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Chaps. I'm joined again live in the studio with Chris Long, president of Ohio Christian Alliance. Chris, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Chaps. Good to be with you today.
So I want to thank you for your friendship over many years, but also for your leadership in organizing the peaceful prayer rally that preceded what became the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. As far as I could tell, watching it on TV from here in Colorado, and by the way, thanks for coming all the way to Colorado to do this interview.
You're welcome.
And it went off without a hitch, as you were saying, but politically, there were many delegates from many states representing many candidates. Mm-hmm. In fact, the Colorado delegation mostly supported Ted Cruz, but the Ohio delegation of delegates to the National Convention in Cleveland supported who?
They supported Governor Kasich. It was a winner-take-all primary, and these were the 66 delegates representing Governor Kasich. That's who was representing him on the floor at the convention, the week of the convention. The governor himself did not come to the convention, to the dismay of many, by the way. Again, as we said earlier, I mean, this was a historic event. First political convention since 1936 in the state of Ohio.
And he had run for president, and he actually won his home state of Ohio. Did he win any other states?
Let's see. He picked up a number of delegates, but I think outside of Ohio, I'm trying to think, he came in second in New Hampshire.
I remember that. That's true.
Not really sure what else he might have won.
So when they came time for the roll call vote on the floor, you were there on the floor.
I was there. I was there in the arena both Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Yes, and so I mean, it was an exciting event, and it was a lot of high drama. But go on with your point.
Well, I was saying there was some debate in the Rules Committee about whether or not delegates would be allowed to vote their conscience, and some of the people in Colorado protested and walked out. But the people in Ohio did cast votes for John Kasich.
They did, but you know, as the week progressed, obviously, we were hoping that John Kasich would come to the stage. In fact, we were hoping that the governor would have opened and welcomed everyone. It would have been fitting for him to do so. He missed an opportunity. He did come to the city. He held an event across town and had his delegation come over there and some of his supporters there. But it was, it was a little bit, disappointing that the governor didn't come to the convention. But nevertheless, we had a great convention, and things went well.
Was sort of preordained or scripted to become the Donald Trump coronation. I mean, he won fair and square.
He did.
He got more votes than everybody else, got more delegates than everybody else. And despite, this conscience movement, which ultimately failed, Ted Cruz had a lot of support, and Ted Cruz was brave enough to give a speech. Were you there? Did you see what Ted Cruz said?
I was there. He gave a great speech. There is question whether he should have endorsed Donald Trump, or why did he come if he wasn't going to endorse him?
Maybe that's why Kasich stayed away, because he would have put in the same quandary.
Possibly. Obviously, I don't think that Ted Cruz wanted to be booed in front of millions of people as he was. Of course, that's a hometown crowd for Donald Trump, don't forget. The delegates represent the nominee, by and large.
Right.
There's a few exceptions of Colorado and Ohio, but by and large, these were delegates who were for Donald J. Trump. So when they didn't hear the endorsement, of course, they were displeased, and I felt bad for Ted. I think he'll be fine, and I think his political career will be fine. But the point is that it was a week in which Donald Trump won fair and square. The speakers that were lined up were to bolster his nomination. I think he had a great convention, and of course, evangelicals were very pleased that he chose Governor Mike Pence, a strong Christian conservative,
Yes.
as his running mate. That was, in fact, over the objections of some of his team who wanted him to pick another VP choice. But I understand that Paul Manafort, his campaign manager, urged him to pick Governor Pence, and he turned and accepted the advice of his campaign manager.
I
and chose the
strongly
governor.
support Governor Mike Pence, who is now the governor of Indiana. But when he was congressman from Indiana, he helped me fight for chaplains' rights to pray in Jesus' name. So home run in the vice presidential pick. But honestly, for some conservative Christians, the jury is still out on Donald Trump. I know he's better than Hillary Clinton as far as Supreme Court nominees and things that conservative Christians care about. But what did you hear when Donald Trump gave his acceptance speech? He spoke for 73 minutes on the last night. I think it was Thursday night of the convention. National TV audience. What was the mood like in the arena?
Well, it was electric. Obviously, it's the final night. It's what everybody was building up to. There wasn't a seat that was available of those that were designated for either delegates or guests to come and to hear the speech. So it was a full arena that night. I think he did very well. He hit on all the points of his economic plan, how he wants to talk about national security for the country, which includes border security, which has been a porous border, and those on the Texas border can tell you of just the heavy traffic of drug traffickers and human traffic coming across that border on an ongoing basis is a real problem. He also talked about evangelicals, and he said, I want to thank evangelicals. He says, I have their support, and I'm not even sure that I'm deserving of it, but I'm thankful for it. I think that was a very honest and a moment of contrition that people appreciated from him.
It was humble, and you almost never see humility from Donald Trump, but
Yes.
I thought that was a nice moment.
Well, look, we need to really pray about this election, obviously for both candidates, but the thing about Mr. Trump is that he does say that Christians have gotten a bad deal, in his words, over the last number of years. Your instance in the U.S. military.
Right.
And we see these kinds of cases continuing in the military and also in the public sector. The church is under assault with the SCOTUS decision on homosexual marriage. And so he says, I will protect the rights of Christians. So I think that, in fact, he had this meeting in New York where I think there was to be 300 to 400 evangelical and pro-life leaders from across the country that were invited. Dr. Ben Carson actually arranged this with the Trump campaign. This was about 6 weeks ago. Well, there ended up being 1,000 that came. I was invited, but I wasn't able to come. I sent a representative to give me a full briefing. And we did. In fact, there was people that went that were real skeptics of the nominee. They came away with a better opinion of him. And he wasn't running off. He didn't come and talk and leave. He stayed there, took questions, answered questions. Mike Huckabee was involved. Dr. Dobson, Franklin Graham opened with prayer. Ben Carson, of course, and Mike Huckabee moderated the event, and leadership from across the country. So I think a lot of concerns among evangelicals and pro-lifers were addressed, not all, by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think that Tony Perkins said it well and said, look, we're going to start a conversation. And I remember what Phyllis Schlafly said some years ago when there was a nominee that was put forward. And I said, well, this isn't the person we want, but what do we do now? She looked at me and she said, get him on as many issues as you possibly can. And I think that's what's important for Christians, is that you look for a candidate that will listen to us on our concerns, on religious liberty, on pro-life issues, what we're talking about with the family structure and the burden on families with the economy and with taxes. And so we need to get the ear of a candidate who will listen to us.
Well, you can't get any better advice than that from Phyllis Schlafly herself. We're going to take another short break. When we come back, I'll ask Chris about the movement in Ohio. Is it trending towards Donald Trump?
Giving you a megaphone in Washington, D.C. Dr. Chaps will be right back.
How is your marriage doing? I want to tell you about an exciting new 4-part video DVD Bible study series on God's plan for marriage. In this video series, we team up with marriage and family ministry expert Vince Dacchioli.
There are a lot of things that get in the way of our ability to have a healthy marriage. But with the way God intended it, He always wanted us to see His view of our relationship together. So everything we do when we talk about marriage, or whether we're talking to men or whether we're talking to pastors and leaders, it all centers around this idea of vision. It's very important that we understand who God is and our relationship with Him is right in order for us to be able to live out really and truly Ephesians.
And that also informs our role as men, how to love our wives. We can't really
Exactly.
love them unless we understand the love of God.
Exactly. So if you just think about love, we tend to think that love is an emotion. It's more something that I feel, whereas the true definition of love, the way Jesus intended it, is not just an emotion, but it's charity. It's what I do. You know, to the degree that I am able to see my wife or my spouse through His eyes, that determines everything in my relationship.
Yeah. And we go through the scriptures in 4 different parts. Part 1 is God's design for man and woman. Part 2 is godly roles for husband and wife. 3 is sex and intimacy within godly marriage. And also God's plan for divorce. You want to have this important 4-part video series available for a suggested donation of $30 if you call our toll-free prayer line at 866-OBEY-GOD. Again, that's 866-OBEY-GOD. Or visit our website, prayinjesusname.org. You too can have a godly marriage.
He is the intersection of church and state. Here is Dr. Chaps.
Welcome back. I am Dr. Chaps. You're watching PIJN News. We're here with our last segment with Chris Long, live in the studio from Ohio. Chris, thanks again for coming to do this interview.
Thank you.
So we've talked about Donald Trump a little bit, but the polls were up, I think, a 5-point bounce after the convention, and now after the Democrat convention, Hillary Clinton bounced back, maybe a 5-point jump for her. So things are still status quo. It looks like Hillary is ahead nationwide. She's winning in a lot of the what they call toss-up states, and Ohio is always one of those battleground states. Before we get to the analysis between Trump and Hillary, what do you remember from 2008 or 2012?
Well, just about the polls, Mr. Trump was up 7 points last week, but you're right. She probably got a bounce coming out of convention, so it's going to be a dead heat again in the battleground state of Ohio, which is a must-win for the Republicans, that's for sure. We'll talk about how we think that's trending for November. 2008 was an interesting year, obviously. John McCain was the Republican nominee, and, he understood the importance of Ohio. We actually had a small group meeting with him, with some of the faith leaders in Ohio, where he wouldn't meet with the national folks. He came to Cincinnati, met with us, and basically we encouraged him to pick a conservative running mate. And out of that came Sarah Palin. Now, we didn't speak it by name, and I didn't know Miss Palin, but 3 weeks later he announces her down the street at Wright State University in Dayton and invites us to the audience that night for her announcement. So obviously the candidates understand the importance of Ohio.
And McCain, if I remember, lost Ohio, lost the election.
He did. He did better than Mr. Romney. Mr. Romney didn't do as well. John McCain understood that Southeast Ohio, for instance, very important sector. Donald Trump is doing very well there, by the way.
Cincinnati?
No, that's Southeast Ohio. That's coal country, oil and gas fracking right now.
By West Virginia and Kentucky.
Yeah, that's right, in Pennsylvania on the Ohio River. Very important area. I think this go around, and so Mr. Trump is doing very well there. Mr. Romney did terribly there because he was perceived as someone was kind of the banker type, is kind of removed from the everyday man. And the coal miners have been decimated by Mr. Obama's war on coal, as you know. So these are communities that have been hard hit, hardworking people, good people who have kept the lights on in Ohio for over 100 years.
The blue collar workers, and I'm wondering if, when Mr. Trump talks about getting rid of NAFTA, if that's going to draw back what they used to call the Reagan Democrats. Those blue-collar factory workers, the ones in Michigan, the ones in Cleveland.
And in Pennsylvania. I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's exactly what's happening. I've talked to my contacts who have friends in the union community. Now, the unions themselves may not be endorsing him, but the rank and file is very much supporting Donald Trump. In fact, in the primary would bear that out. So let's look at Ohio's primary. Mr. Trump came a few visits to Ohio. He got 700,000 votes. John Kasich, the governor, 910,000 votes, and Ted Cruz got 258,000. So the majority of Republicans did not support the governor for the nomination, and Rubio got 58,000. But Trump did very well in the primary, but never doubt the power of the incumbent governor, especially when he was coming back to the state to tap people on the shoulder and says, I want you to support me. And of course they did. But I think that the state is trending for Trump, especially with blue-collar workers. That's something we've not seen in the Republican ranks in some time, since Reagan, actually.
Well, if I remember, when Bill Clinton ran for president, he won Ohio, he won the presidency. When George W. Bush ran for president, he won Ohio, he won the presidency. When McCain and Romney lost Ohio, they lost the presidency. Is Ohio really that powerful? Is it the bellwether that could change the entire election?
Absolutely. It's about 144,000 vote swing as well. That's how much George Bush won by. That's how much Mr. Obama won by in 2008. So it's very much of a swing state, and it really comes down to the nitty-gritty. So there's going to be a lot of visits. Mr. Trump, actually, after the convention, has already been there several times post-convention. So he already spent a lot of time in Ohio, and Miss Clinton was there today, of course. So I think you're going to see a lot of visits once again. In fact, in 2004, there were 60 combined visits between John Kerry and George Bush leading up to the 2004 election. Of course, Ohio was the telling factor that night in Bush's reelection.
And if you look at the swing states, there's really only about 8 states historically that could flop back and forth. Colorado is one. Mr. Trump was here last week. Ohio is another one, and we're going to be looking at very closely at Pennsylvania, at Virginia. Hillary Clinton just selected Tim Kaine because he's from Virginia, with other reasons. But Chris, I'm so glad. We only have about 20 seconds here. Give people your website and any resources they find there.
Absolutely. You want to follow us in Ohio as the election gets tight, and our website will have a voter guide and information. It's the Ohio Christian Alliance Voter Guide. All you have to do is Google Ohio Christian Alliance or go to ohioca.org.
All right, and tomorrow we will have Chris Long back again. He's going to talk about some of the pastor protection laws they're trying to pass in Ohio. We'll see you next time.
Chaplain Klingenschmitt is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy who earned his Ph.D. in theology from Regent University. As a former Navy chaplain, by taking a public stand for freedom of speech and religious expression, and by sacrificing his own 16-year career and $1 million pension, he was vindicated by the U.S. Congress, who changed the law and restored freedom for military chaplains to pray in Jesus' name. Dr. Chaps not only defended the Constitution, but his petitions have helped change the law in 10 states, restoring freedom to pray in Jesus' name. Dr. Chaps needs your financial support to stay on the air. Would you please send your best donation today? Please visit prayinjesusname.org to donate online. Or you can mail a check to Pray in Jesus Name Ministries, Post Office Box 77077, Colorado Springs, Colorado 80970. You can also call us toll-free right now at 866-OBEY-GOD. That's 866-OBEY-GOD. Please sign up for our free emails at prayinjesusname.org. Again, that's prayinjesusname.org.